I drove to my son's office on a Tuesday morning with a maintenance report tucked under my arm. The report was fake. I knew it was fake. I'd printed it myself the night before and filled with meaningless observations about HVAC systems and elevator certifications. But Jake didn't know that. He thought I was just his old man shuffling through life, trying to stay relevant. The building stood downtown, all glass and steel, reflecting the gray November sky. Modern, sleek, expensive. My son had chosen it himself 3 years ago when his tech startup finally took off. He'd walked me through the lobby that first day, chest puffed out, showing me the open workspace, the standing desks, the coffee bar with its gleaming espresso machine. "This is the future, Dad," he'd said. "This is what real success looks like." I'd nodded, smiled, kept my mouth shut. I pushed through the revolving door and crossed the marble lobby. The elevator hummed as it carried me to the 4th floor. When the doors opened, I stepped into the familiar chaos of his headquarters. Dozens of young people hunched over laptops, typing frantically. Phones buzzed. Someone laughed near the water cooler. The air smelled like cold brew and ambition. Jake's office sat at the far end, glass-walled, overlooking the main workspace. I could see him inside, leaning back in his chair, talking to someone on speakerphone. His wife Amanda stood beside him, scrolling through her phone, her perfectly manicured nails clicking against the screen. I walked slowly, letting my shoes tap against the polished concrete floor. A few heads turned. Most ignored me. I was background noise, the old guy who used to help out, the relic from the early days. Jake saw me through the glass. His expression shifted, not quite annoyance, but close. He ended his call and stood. Amanda looked up, her eyes narrowing. I knocked once and entered. "Dad," Jake didn't smile. "I wasn't expecting you. I brought the maintenance report." I held up the folder. "Thought you'd want to see it." "Right." He took it without looking at it, tossed it on his desk. "Thanks." Amanda stepped closer, her heels clicking. She wore a dress that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage. "It's so sweet that you still try to help, Richard. Really." The way she said try made it clear what she thought about my efforts. "I was actually about to call you," Jake said. He glanced past me, out to the main floor. Several employees had stopped working, their attention drifting toward the glass office. "I need to make an announcement. You should stay." Something in his tone set off alarms in my head, but I just nodded. "Sure." He moved past me, opening the door. "Everyone, can I get your attention, please?" The workspace fell silent. Keyboards stopped clicking. Conversations died mid-sentence. 30 pairs of eyes turned toward us. Jake stepped out onto the main floor, and I followed. Amanda came too, positioning herself slightly behind her husband, arms crossed, that subtle smirk on her face. "I want to introduce someone," Jake began. He gestured to a young man standing near the design team's cluster of desks. "This is Brandon Wells. Starting today, Brandon will be taking over all operational oversight for the company." Brandon smiled, gave a little wave. He looked about 25, wearing the standard tech startup uniform, dark jeans, gray t-shirt, expensive sneakers. "Brandon comes to us from a major firm in San Francisco," Jake continued. "He's got extensive experience in scaling companies like ours. I'm confident he's exactly what we need to take us to the next level." A few people clapped politely. Most just watched, confused. Then Jake turned to me. "Dad, I know you've been involved with the company since the beginning. You've helped out where you could. But the truth is, we've reached a point where we need professional management. We need people who understand modern business practices. People who can move fast and adapt." The office felt smaller suddenly, warmer. "What I'm saying is," Jake paused, as if choosing his words carefully. But I could see it in his eyes. He'd rehearsed this. "You're too old to contribute at the level we need. We're replacing your oversight role effective immediately." Silence. Complete suffocating silence. I stood there, that fake maintenance report still in Jake's office behind us, and I didn't move, didn't speak. I just looked at my son, at his designer suit and his expensive watch and his carefully styled hair. Amanda leaned toward another woman standing nearby, Rachel from HR, and whispered, just loud enough for me to hear, "It's for the best. He's been living in the past for years. Honestly, it was getting embarrassing." A few people looked away. One guy near the back pulled out his phone, suddenly very interested in his screen. Jake put his hand on my shoulder. "You understand, right? This isn't personal. It's just business." I looked at his hand, then at his face. "Sure," I said quietly. "I understand." "Good." He removed his hand, already turning away, already moving on. Brandon, let me show you the project management software we use. They walked away. Amanda followed, her heels clicking. The staff slowly returned to their work, the moment already forgotten. I stood there for exactly 10 seconds longer. Then I turned and walked back to the elevator. Nobody looked at me. Nobody said goodbye. In the parking garage, I sat in my truck for 5 minutes, hands on the steering wheel, staring at the concrete wall in front of me. Then I pulled out my phone and called my wife. How'd it go? Linda asked. Exactly as expected. He did it in front of everyone? Every single person. She was quiet for a moment. Then, what do you want to do? I started the engine. What we planned. Are you sure? Linda, that was the moment I stopped being his father and became his problem. I drove home, following the familiar streets, past the familiar houses, thinking about everything I hadn't said in that office. Everything Jake didn't know. Everything he was about to learn. Because here's what my son had forgotten. 22 years ago, I'd bought that building. Put down cash, took out a small loan, cleared it in 5 years. The title was in my name, had been the entire time. 18 years ago, I'd started filing patents, technologies that would later become the foundation of Jake's company, software architecture, data processing methods, user interface innovations, every single one registered under my name, held in a trust that Jake had never bothered to investigate. 3 years ago, when Jake wanted to move his growing startup into that downtown building, I'd signed a lease with him. A very specific lease. One that gave me the right to terminate with 30 days' notice if certain conditions weren't met. Conditions like maintaining proper insurance, keeping up with building codes, treating all stakeholders with respect. Jake thought he'd built his empire from nothing. He'd built it on a foundation I'd spent decades creating. And he just kicked me off it. I pulled into our driveway. Linda was already at the door, watching me park. Well? She asked as I climbed out. He has no idea what's coming. She smiled. Not a happy smile. A smile that said, good. We went inside. I headed straight for my workshop in the basement. The space was exactly as I'd left it. Workbench covered in old blueprints, filing cabinets full of documents, computer monitors displaying spreadsheets and legal forms. This was where I'd spent the last 3 months preparing for today. Planning, researching, building my case. Linda came down the stairs behind me. Did Amanda say anything? Called me embarrassing. Said I live in the past. That woman. Linda shook her head. She's worse than him. I pulled out the filing cabinet's bottom drawer and extracted a thick folder. Inside, the original building deed, the patents, the lease agreement, the corporate formation documents that listed me as primary shareholder. Jake thought he owned 60% of his company. He was wrong. The operating agreement clearly stated that patent holders maintained controlling interest until explicitly transferred. I'd never transferred anything. I'd let him believe he was in charge because it was easier that way, because I wanted him to succeed, but that was before he decided to humiliate me in front of his entire staff. Linda picked up one of the patent documents, scanning it. When are you going to tell him? Not yet. I sat down at my computer, pulled up a spreadsheet. First, we let him think he's won. Let him settle into his new reality. Let Brandon start making decisions. Then, when they're comfortable... I clicked through several tabs, each one showing different aspects of the building's maintenance records. We start pulling threads. What kind of threads? I pointed at the screen. Safety inspections? Jake's been ignoring them for 8 months. The elevator certification expired in April. Fire suppression system hasn't been tested since last year. HVAC is running on outdated filters. Any one of these violations could shut down the building. Linda leaned closer. You're going to report him? No, I'm going to let the city discover it, anonymously. She was quiet for a moment. That seems cruel. He called me too old to contribute. I know. In front of everyone. I know. She touched my shoulder. If you want to do this, I'll help you. But Richard, once you start, there's no going back. He's still your son. I looked at the patents spread across my workbench. At the building deed. At 22 years of careful planning that Jake had dismissed with a single sentence. If they want to treat me like I'm nothing, I said, then I'll show them what nothing really looks like. My phone buzzed. Unknown number, I answered. Mr. Brenner? A man's voice, cautious. Speaking. This is Tom Chen. I'm on Jake's board. We met last year at the investor dinner. I remembered him. Mid-40s, serious expression, one of the early investors who'd believed in Jake's vision. What can I do for you, Tom? I think... He paused. You should know what your son is planning. Can we meet? When? Tomorrow. There's a diner on 5th Street. Do you know it? I know it. 2:00? I'll be there. He hung up. Linda raised her eyebrows. Board member? Sounds worried. Good. I turned back to my computer, opening a new document. Time to make a list. Time to catalog everything Jake didn't know he'd just lost. Outside, rain started falling. The first real rain of November, cold and steady. I watched it through the basement window, tiny drops racing down the glass. My phone buzzed again. This time, a text message. From Rachel, the HR woman who'd been standing next to Amanda. Mr. Brenner, I'm sorry about today. That wasn't right. I deleted it without responding. 10 minutes later, another text. Different number. It was a photo. The office. My old nameplate being removed from the advisory board wall. Jake standing there watching, Amanda beside him. No message, just the photo. I saved it to my phone, added it to a folder I'd been building. Evidence, documentation, ammunition. Linda brought me coffee. What's that? Motivation. She looked at the image, her expression hardening. I never liked that girl. I know. And Jake? When did he become this? I thought about that. When had my son turned into someone who could humiliate his own father without hesitation? When had ambition replaced basic decency? Maybe he was always this way, I said quietly. Maybe I just didn't want to see it. Or maybe Amanda brought it out of him. Doesn't matter. He made his choice. I spent the next 2 hours reviewing documents, cross-referencing dates, building timelines, every patent filing, every lease payment, every corporate document that Jake had signed without reading carefully. At 6:00, Linda called me up for dinner. We ate in silence, the television playing some cooking show neither of us watched. Are you scared? She asked finally. No. You should be. Jake has resources, lawyers, money. I have the truth, and better lawyers. She almost smiled. When did you become this cold? When my son decided I was disposable. After dinner, I went back to the workshop, pulled up the building's maintenance database, started documenting every violation, every ignored warning, every shortcut Jake had taken to save money. The elevator certification alone could cost him $50,000 to fix. The fire suppression system, another $30,000. The HVAC, $20,000. Add in the fines for operating without proper inspections, and we were looking at serious money. But money wasn't the point. The point was watching him realize that everything he'd built was built on a foundation he didn't own, that his success had always been conditional, that the moment he stopped respecting the people who'd made him possible, those people could take it all away. At midnight, Linda came down again. You should sleep. Soon. Richard. I looked up at her. He called me too old to contribute. I know. In front of 30 people. I know. She sat down beside me, took my hand. And we're going to make him regret it. But not tonight. Tonight you sleep. Tomorrow you meet with Tom. Then we plan the next move. She was right. I was exhausted, running on anger and coffee. We went upstairs. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the rain. Tomorrow, I'd learn what else my son was planning. Tomorrow, I'd start pulling threads. Tomorrow, the foundation would begin to crack. Jake had taught me something today. He'd taught me that family meant nothing when ambition was involved, that respect was conditional, that the moment you were no longer useful, you were discarded. Fine. I could work with that. I closed my eyes and imagined his face when he finally understood what he'd done, when he realized that the old man he'd dismissed in front of his staff was the same man who held every card that mattered. That was the image that finally let me sleep. As the story unfolds, hit the hype button, like, subscribe, and write in the comments. Would you forgive them or walk away? The diner on 5th Street smelled like grease and old coffee, red vinyl booths, cracked linoleum floors, a jukebox in the corner that probably hadn't worked since 1995. The kind of place where waitresses called you Han and the menu hadn't changed in 30 years. I arrived at 1:55. Tom Chen was already there, sitting in a corner booth, nursing a cup of coffee. He looked tired, older than I remembered. Mr. Brenner. He stood halfway, offered his hand. I shook it and slid into the booth across from him. Just Richard. Tom. He sat back down, glanced around the diner. Only a few other customers. An old couple near the window, a trucker at the counter, a woman reading a newspaper. Thanks for meeting me. A waitress appeared, poured me coffee without asking. I ordered a burger. Tom ordered nothing. So, I said, stirring cream into my coffee. What does Jake have planned? Tom looked at his hands. He's calling a board vote. For what? To remove you from any remaining advisory capacity, to strike your name from all company documents, to formally sever your connection to the business. I sipped my coffee. It was bitter, needed more sugar. When? Next month, December 15th? That's awfully specific. He wants it done before the new year. Clean slate, he calls it. Clean slate? I repeated the words, tasting them. They left a bad flavor. Anything else? Tom hesitated. Then, he's also planning to challenge the patent agreements. His lawyers think they can argue that since you were functioning as a consultant rather than an active employee, the patents should transfer to the company by default. That's not how patents work. I know, his lawyers know, but Jake thinks he can pressure you into signing them over rather than face a prolonged legal battle. I set down my coffee cup carefully. He thinks I'll just give up. He thinks you're old and tired and won't fight back. Tom met my eyes. He's wrong, isn't he? Very wrong. Good. Something like relief crossed his face. Because Jake is running this company into the ground. He's ignoring advice, burning through cash, making promises to investors he can't keep. And Amanda, he shook his head. She's encouraging him. Every bad decision, she's right there, telling him he's brilliant. You're on the board. Can't you stop him? I'm 1 vote out of 5, and the other board members are either his friends or too heavily invested to rock the boat. They want to believe in him. They want to believe this company is the next big thing. But you don't. I've been doing this for 20 years. I know what success looks like, and I know what failure looks like. Jake is heading toward failure fast. The waitress brought my burger. I ate slowly, thinking. Why are you telling me this? I asked finally. Because you deserve to know what's coming, and because... He paused. Because I remember when Jake started this company. You were there at every meeting. You helped him write the business plan. You connected him with his first clients. Without you, there would be no company. And now he's trying to erase you from the story. People do that, I said. They forget where they came from. Doesn't make it right. We sat in silence for a moment. The trucker at the counter paid his bill and left. Rain started falling outside, soft at first, then harder. Tom pulled out a folder from his briefcase. I brought you something. He slid it across the table. I opened it. Inside were copies of board meeting minutes, financial statements, and internal memos, all marked confidential. This could get you fired, I said. Probably. But if Jake wins his board vote next month, I'm done anyway. He's made it clear he only wants yes men around him. I flipped through the documents. Expense reports showing Amanda charging personal purchases to the company. Meeting minutes where Jake overruled safety concerns. Financial projections that assumed growth rates that were mathematically impossible. He's committed fraud, I said quietly. Close to it. Not quite over the line, but close. And the other board members don't see this? They see what they want to see. Success, growth, the next big exit. Tom finished his coffee. But you and I both know there's no exit coming. Not with the way he's managing things. I closed the folder. Thank you for this. Use it carefully. If Jake finds out I gave you those documents, he won't. Tom stood, dropped cash on the table for his coffee. One more thing. Jake told the board that you were becoming a liability, that you were making claims about ownership and patents that were delusional. Delusional. His word, not mine. Does he actually believe that? I think Amanda's convinced him of it. She's been whispering in his ear for months, telling him you're trying to control him, that you can't let go of the past. Jake always was susceptible to flattery. I thought about my son, about the boy who used to bring me drawings of inventions, who used to sit in my workshop, asking questions about how things worked, who used to tell people his dad was the smartest person he knew. That boy was gone. What will you do? Tom asked. What I should have done years ago. Set boundaries. He nodded slowly. Good luck, Richard. You too. He left. I finished my burger, paid my bill, and sat in the booth for another 10 minutes reading through the documents he'd given me. The expense reports were particularly interesting. Amanda had charged over $40,000 to the company in the last 6 months alone. Designer clothes, spa treatments, a weekend trip to Napa that had nothing to do with business. Jake had approved every charge. I photographed each page with my phone, uploaded them to a secure cloud drive, then put the physical copies back in the folder. My phone buzzed, a text from someone named Dennis Morton. Mr. Brenner, this is Jake's old friend from college. Can we talk? I called the number. Richard? Dennis sounded nervous. Thanks for calling back. You said you were Jake's friend. Was. Past tense. He cut me loose 3 months ago. Why? Because I told him Amanda was bad for business. He didn't like that. told me to mind my own business, then uninvited me from his wedding anniversary party. I'm sorry. Don't be. I'm calling because I heard what happened yesterday, the office thing. Word travels fast. Jake made sure of it. He's been telling people all day, bragging about it, really. How he finally freed himself from his father's shadow. How he's a self-made man now. I closed my eyes. He said that. At lunch today. I wasn't there, but another friend was. Called me right after. We thought you should know. I appreciate that. There's more. Dennis paused. Jake's planning something big. He wouldn't say what, but he's been meeting with lawyers all week. And Amanda keeps telling people that certain problems are about to be solved permanently. Problems? I think she means you. I thanked Dennis and hung up. Sat there in the diner booth, rain hammering against the windows, and let the anger build. Not hot anger. Cold anger. The kind that doesn't explode but calculates. Plans. Waits. I drove to the office building downtown. Not Jake's floor. The building management office on the first floor. The manager, Peter, looked up from his desk when I walked in. Mr. Brenner, what can I do for you? I need to review the maintenance records. For what? Everything. Elevator, HVAC, fire systems, structural inspections. Peter's expression shifted. Is there a problem? Just doing my due diligence. This is my building, after all. Right, of course. He pulled out a filing cabinet, started extracting folders. Most recent inspections are digital, but the older ones are hard copy. I spent the next hour going through everything. Peter was right. Jake had been ignoring maintenance. The elevator certification had expired 4 months ago. Fire suppression system hadn't been serviced in 18 months. HVAC filters were 3 months overdue for replacement. Structural inspection was 6 weeks late. Every violation was documented, every ignored warning, every email from Peter that Jake had never answered. Has Jake seen these? I asked. Peter shook his head. I've sent him probably 20 emails. He ignores most of them. The few times he responds, it's just to say he'll get to it later. Later. That's what he always says. I photographed every document, every email, every violation notice. Peter, if the city comes to inspect this building right now, what happens? He winced. They shut us down, immediately. Every violation here is a shutdown offense. We're talking tens of thousands in fines, minimum. And Jake knows this? He knows. I've told him repeatedly. He keeps saying his people are handling it, but nothing ever gets handled. I thanked Peter and left. Sat in my truck in the parking garage, rain drumming on the roof, and made 3 phone calls. The first was to my lawyer, Mitchell. I need you to file a formal notice of lease violation. On what grounds? Failure to maintain proper building certifications. I'll send you the documentation. That'll start a 30-day clock. After that, you can terminate the lease. That's the idea. The second call was to the city building inspector's office. Anonymous tip, building at 4th and Main, multiple safety violations, occupants at risk. The third call was to Linda. How'd it go? She asked. Worse than I thought. How much worse? I told her. All of it. The board vote, the patent challenge, the bragging, the expense fraud, the ignored maintenance. She was quiet for a long moment. Then, what do you need me to do? Start organizing the patents. Every document, every filing, every piece of proof that shows ownership. I want it airtight. If Jake's lawyers try to challenge anything, I want to bury them in documentation. Done. Anything else? Yeah. Call that reporter friend of yours, the one who covers business news. Tell her there might be a story about corporate fraud and safety violations at a downtown tech startup. Don't mention names yet. Just plant the seed. Richard? He called himself self-made. He told people I was delusional. He's trying to erase me from his own story. I know. So we're going to remind him where he came from, and we're going to do it in a way he can't ignore. I drove home. The rain followed me, sheets of water across the windshield, wipers working overtime. In my workshop, I laid out everything. The documents from Tom, the photos from Peter, the text messages, the expense reports. Linda came down the stairs. Your lawyer called. He's filing the notice tomorrow morning. Good. The city inspector is coming Friday. Better. She sat down beside me, looking at the evidence spread across my workbench. This is really happening. Yes. And you're sure? Because once we do this, there's no coming back. Jake will never forgive you. I looked at her. Do you think he'd forgive me anyway? After what he did? She didn't answer. He made his choice, I said. Now I'm making mine. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept seeing Jake's face in the office, that dismissive look, that casual cruelty. Kept hearing Amanda's voice. He's been living in the past for years. Past. They thought I was a relic, an obstacle, something to be removed. Fine. Let them think that. Let them believe the old man was beaten. And then, when they were comfortable, when they thought they'd won, I'd show them exactly what the past could do to the present. Mitchell's office smelled like old books and expensive coffee, leather chairs, oak desk, law degrees on the wall, the kind of place where serious business happened. "You're sure about this?" Mitchell asked, reviewing the documents I'd brought. "Completely. Because once we file these papers, there's no taking it back. We're talking full lease termination, patent reclamation, corporate restructuring." "I understand." He leaned back in his chair, studying me. "I've been your lawyer for 15 years, Richard. I've never seen you this cold." "I'm not cold. I'm done being warm." "There's a difference?" "Yes." Linda sat beside me, her hand on my arm. "We've thought about this carefully. We know what we're doing." "Do you?" Mitchell set down the documents. "Because I need you to understand something. If we do this, Jake loses everything. The building, the company, his reputation, everything he's built in the last 5 years collapses. That's not hyperbole. That's legal fact." "He built it on my foundation," I said quietly. "And he tried to kick me off that foundation, so now I'm removing the foundation entirely." "He's your son." "He stopped being my son when he called me too old to contribute." Mitchell was silent for a moment. Then he picked up his pen. "All right, let's build your case." We spent the next 3 hours going through everything, every patent, every clause in the lease agreement, every piece of evidence showing Jake's negligence and fraud. "The expense reports are damning," Mitchell said. $40,000 in personal charges. That's textbook embezzlement." "Can we use them?" "Absolutely. If Jake tries to fight the lease termination, we show these to a judge. No court will side with him after seeing this." "What about the patents?" "Those are airtight. You filed them. You own them. The only way Jake could claim them is if you'd explicitly transferred ownership, which you haven't." "He thinks the corporate agreement did that automatically." "He's wrong. Corporate agreements don't override patent law. These are your intellectual property. Period." Linda asked, "What about the board meeting Monday? Can we stop it?" "We don't need to stop it. We just need to attend. And when Jake tries to vote Richard out, we present the actual ownership documents. The board will have to acknowledge that Richard is the majority shareholder." "Will they?" "They won't have a choice. The documents are legal fact. Jake's been operating under a false assumption about ownership for years. Once the board sees the truth, they'll have to act accordingly." I thought about that. Jake standing in front of his board, confident, ready to erase me completely, and then Linda and I walking in with Mitchell, armed with 22 years of documentation. "What happens after?" I asked. "After we show them everything?" "The board will probably panic. They'll realize they've been making decisions based on incomplete information. Some will want to sue Jake for misrepresentation. Others will just want to distance themselves from the mess. And Jake? Jake will be removed, immediately. The board won't have a choice. You're the majority shareholder. If you want him out, he's out." "What about Amanda?" Mitchell smiled slightly. "Amanda has no legal standing in the company. She's not an employee, not a shareholder. She's just Jake's wife. And once Jake's gone, she's gone too." Linda asked, "What if Jake refuses to leave?" "Then we get a court order. Force him out. It won't come to that, though. Once the board sees the evidence, they'll pressure Jake to resign rather than face criminal charges for the embezzlement." "Criminal charges?" $40,000 in fraudulent expense claims? Absolutely criminal. The DA would jump on a case like this. I sat with that for a moment. My son, facing criminal charges. "Richard?" Mitchell's voice was gentle. "You don't have to do this. We can still stop. Find another way." "What other way?" "Negotiation. Settlement. You keep the building and patents. Jake keeps the company but operates under strict oversight. Everyone walks away. And he learns nothing. Maybe, but at least you don't destroy him." "He tried to destroy me first." Mitchell nodded slowly. "Then we proceed." We left his office with a plan. Monday morning, 9 a.m., we'd arrive at the board meeting. Mitchell would present the documents. The board would be forced to acknowledge reality. And Jake's world would fall apart. At home, I couldn't rest. Kept pacing, thinking, second-guessing. Linda found me in the workshop at midnight. "You haven't slept." "I can't. Talk to me." I gestured at the documents spread across my workbench. "What if I'm wrong? What if this is too much?" "You're not wrong." "But, Richard, listen to me. Jake humiliated you. lied about you, tried to steal from you, put lives at risk because he was too arrogant to listen, and now he's trying to convince people you're delusional. You're not wrong to fight back. It feels wrong, because he's your son. But Richard, he stopped treating you like his father. You don't owe him protection anymore. Don't I? No. You owe yourself dignity, and you owe those employees safety. Jake forfeited your protection the moment he chose image over substance. She was right. I knew she was right. But it still hurt. My phone buzzed. Text from Peter, the building manager. Jake came by tonight, demanded access to maintenance records. When I refused, he threatened to fire me. Thought you should know. I showed Linda the text. He's panicking, she said. Good. Is it? When people panic, they do desperate things. What can he do? He has no leverage, no ownership, no proof of anything. He has lawyers. So do I. Saturday morning, I drove to the building, found Peter in his office, looking stressed. Thanks for the text, I said. Jake was furious, started yelling about sabotage, about how you were destroying his life. What did you tell him? That I work for the building owner, not his company? That if he wanted maintenance records, he needed written authorization from you. How'd he take that? Threatened to sue, then left. I sat down across from Peter's desk. The board meeting is Monday. After that, things are going to change. What kind of changes? Jake's lease will be terminated. He'll have 30 days to vacate. Peter whistled. That's big. Yes? What about my job? You'll keep it. You've been doing everything right. It's Jake who's been the problem. He'll be angry. He already is. After leaving Peter's office, I walked through the building. Every floor, every corner. 22 years I'd owned this place. 22 years of maintenance, improvements, careful management, and Jake had almost destroyed it in 3 years. Cut corners, ignored warnings, put people at risk. On the 4th floor, I stood in the empty office space. Desks abandoned, papers scattered, coffee cups growing mold. This was what Jake's vision looked like. Chaos masquerading as success. My phone rang. Tom Chen, the board member who'd warned me. Richard, there's something you need to know. What? Jake's bringing lawyers to Monday's meeting. Corporate lawyers, the expensive kind. He's planning to challenge everything, your ownership claims, your lease termination, all of it. Let him. You don't understand. These lawyers are good, really good. They'll try to tie you up in so many legal knots that you won't be able to move against Jake for years. I have better lawyers. Maybe. But Richard, this is going to get ugly, publicly ugly. Are you prepared for that? Yes. Because Jake's planning to go to the press. Paint you as a bitter old man trying to sabotage his successful son. Amanda's already drafted a statement. They're going to release it right after the meeting. They're going to lie. They're going to spin. There's a difference. Not to me. Tom was quiet for a moment. Then, I'm on your side. You know that, right? But I need you to be prepared for the fallout. This won't be a quiet family dispute. This will be public, messy, brutal. I know. And you're still going through with it? I am. Then I'll see you Monday. Sunday, Linda and I prepared. She organized all the patents into chronological order. I printed copies of every lease clause, every violation notice, every piece of evidence. Mitchell called at 6. I've received word that Jake's lawyers are planning to file an injunction. Try to stop Monday's meeting altogether. Can they? They can try. Won't work. The meeting was properly scheduled. The board has a right to convene. What about their other strategies? They'll argue that you've been hands-off for years, that you effectively abandoned your ownership rights, that Jake has adverse possession of the company. Adverse possession doesn't work like that. I know, but they'll argue it anyway. Throw everything at the wall, see what sticks. Will anything stick? No. Your documentation is too solid. But Richard, be ready for them to attack your character, your competence, your motives. They're going to paint you as vindictive and unstable. Let them. Are you sure? I'm sure. That night, I barely slept. Lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, thinking about tomorrow, about Jake's face when I walked into that boardroom, about Amanda's expression when she realized their lies wouldn't save them, about the moment when everything changed. Linda rolled over, looked at me in the darkness. You're thinking too much. I'm thinking exactly enough. Are you scared? No. Nervous? Maybe. Second thoughts? Not even one. She touched my face. I'm proud of you. Whatever happens tomorrow, I'm proud. Even if I destroy our son's life? He destroyed his own life. You're just making sure he faces consequences. That feels like semantics. It's truth. Jake made choices. Now he pays for them. That's not cruelty. That's justice. Maybe she was right. Maybe tomorrow, walking into that boardroom with decades of evidence, I'd finally feel something other than anger. Maybe I'd feel peace. But as I lay there in the darkness, listening to rain start falling outside, I knew that wasn't true. Tomorrow wouldn't bring peace. Tomorrow would bring war. And I was ready for it. Monday morning, 9 a.m., the board meeting. Mitchell, Linda, and I stood outside the conference room on the building's 8th floor. Through the glass walls, I could see them gathering. Jake at the head of the table, wearing his best suit. Amanda beside him, perfectly styled, confident. The 5 board members in their seats. Brandon Wells off to the side, looking uncomfortable. And 3 lawyers in expensive suits, briefcases open, documents spread across the table. "Ready?" Mitchell asked. "Ready." He pushed open the door. Conversation stopped. Every head turned. Jake stood. "Dad, what are you doing here?" "Attending a board meeting." I walked in, Linda beside me, Mitchell bringing up the rear with his briefcase. "This company affects my interests. I have a right to be present." "This is a closed meeting. Board members only." "Then you should read your corporate bylaws." Mitchell set his briefcase on the table with a solid thunk. "Major shareholders have attendance rights, and Richard here owns 60% of this company." One of Jake's lawyers stood. "That's contested." "By whom?" "By our client." "On what grounds?" The lawyer gestured to a stack of papers. "Mr. Brenner has operated as a passive investor for years. He's had minimal involvement in day-to-day operations. Under corporate law, extended passivity can constitute abandonment of ownership rights." Mitchell smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. "That's creative. Also completely wrong. Ownership doesn't disappear because you're not in the office every day. Would you like me to cite precedent? Because I have about 40 cases that say you're wrong." "We have precedent, too." "Please, share." The lawyer hesitated. Tom Chen, the friendly board member, cleared his throat. "Perhaps we should look at the actual documents. Richard, you said you have proof of ownership?" I nodded. Linda pulled out the first folder. Inside, the original corporate formation papers. "These are from 5 years ago," I said, sliding them across the table. "When Jake first incorporated. If you look at Section 4, you'll see that patent holders maintain controlling interest until explicitly transferred." One of the other board members, an older woman named Patricia, picked up the documents, started reading. Her expression shifted. "Jake, did you know about this clause?" Jake glanced at his lawyers. "I was told it was standard language." "Standard language that gives your father majority control." "That was never the intent." "Intent doesn't matter," Mitchell said. "Legal language matters, and the legal language is clear." Amanda leaned forward. "Those documents are old. Things change. Verbal agreements, transfers of understanding." "Don't supersede written contracts," Mitchell interrupted. "If Richard had transferred ownership, there would be documentation." "Do you have any such documentation?" Silence. "I'll take that as a no." Jake's lead lawyer tried another approach. "Even if Mr. Brenner technically owns the majority share, he's been inactive. He hasn't attended board meetings, hasn't participated in strategic decisions. He's essentially abandoned his role." "Because Jake asked me to step back," I said quietly. "He said he wanted to run things independently. Said it would be better for the company if I wasn't involved." "Do you have proof of that?" Linda pulled out the second folder. Inside, emails, texts, messages from Jake over the past 3 years, repeatedly asking me to give him space and let him handle things. "Here's one from 18 months ago," I read aloud. "Ofouf, Dad, I appreciate your help, but I need to run this company my way. Please stop coming to board meetings. It's undermining my authority." Patricia looked at Jake. "You sent that?" "It was... Context is important." "What context?" "Dad was being overbearing, questioning every decision. I needed room to operate." "So you asked him to step back, and now you're claiming he abandoned his position?" Patricia shook her head. "That's not how this works, Jake." One of the other board members, a younger guy named Eric, spoke up. "Even if Richard owns the majority share, what about the patents? Jake's been building on those technologies for years. He's the one who made them commercially viable." "True," Mitchell said. "But making something commercially viable doesn't transfer ownership. The patents are still registered to Richard. Every single one." He pulled out the patent documents, 37 of them, each one clearly showing my name as the inventor and owner. "These are the foundation technologies for your entire platform," Mitchell continued. "Without these patents, your company has no intellectual property. no competitive advantage, nothing to sell to investors. Eric paled. Jake, did you know about this? We have an understanding. What kind of understanding? A family understanding. Dad created these technologies, but I built the business. That makes them mine. Legally? Jake didn't answer. Amanda stood. This is ridiculous. You're all acting like Richard has been some kind of silent partner, patiently waiting in the wings. He hasn't. He's been undermining Jake for years, questioning his decisions, trying to maintain control. By doing what? Linda asked coldly. By warning about safety violations? By trying to prevent disasters? By being bitter that his son was more successful than he ever was. The room went silent. I looked at Amanda, really looked at her designer clothes and perfect makeup and practiced confidence. I'm not bitter, I said quietly. I'm disappointed. Same thing. No. Bitter is when you resent someone's success. Disappointed is when you realize their success came at the cost of everything you taught them. I didn't teach my son to ignore safety regulations. I didn't teach him to embezzle company funds. I didn't teach him to lie to investors. I've never lied to investors, Jake said. No? I pulled out the third folder. Financial projections, the ones Jake had shown investors, versus the actual financial statements. The numbers didn't match, not even close. You told investors you'd hit 30% growth last quarter. You hit 12%. You told them you had 50 major clients. You have 23. You told them the building was fully compliant with all safety regulations. I tapped the city inspector's report. It wasn't. Patricia was reading through the financial documents. Jake, these projections, they're wildly optimistic. All startups project aggressive growth. Aggressive is one thing, fictional is another. These numbers are impossible. Jake's lawyers were scrambling now, flipping through their own documents, trying to find something to defend their client. One of them tried, even if there were some exaggerations in the projections, that doesn't change the corporate structure. Jake is the CEO. He's been running this company for 5 years. Removing him now would be catastrophic. More catastrophic than keeping him? Tom Chen asked. Because from where I'm sitting, Jake's been committing fraud, lying to investors, ignoring safety regulations, using company funds for personal expenses. He looked at me. Richard, you have evidence of personal expense fraud? Linda pulled out the fourth folder. Amanda's expense reports. Every spa treatment, every shopping trip, every fraudulent charge, $40,000 worth. Oh, God, Patricia whispered, reading through them. Amanda, did you really charge a weekend in Napa to the company? Amanda's confidence cracked. Those were business expenses. Networking? Networking at a spa? Yes. You'd be surprised how much business happens in those environments. I would be surprised, because I've been in business for 30 years, and I've never written off a spa day as networking. Eric was shaking his head. This is bad. This is really bad. If the IRS audits us and finds this, they'll find it, Mitchell said, because we're going to report it. Jake slammed his hand on the table. You can't do this. You can't just waltz in here and destroy everything I've built. I'm not destroying anything, I said. I'm correcting the record. You've been operating under false pretenses for years. You thought you owned this company. You don't. You thought you controlled the patents. You don't. You thought you could ignore safety regulations and defraud investors and embezzle company funds without consequences. You can't. I never embezzled $40,000 in personal charges. That's textbook embezzlement. Those were Amanda's charges, not mine. Amanda's head whipped toward him. Excuse me? You charged those expenses. I just approved them. You told me to charge them. No, I said you could use the company card for business expenses. You interpreted that liberally. The lawyers exchanged glances. This was falling apart fast. Patricia stood. I moved to suspend this meeting pending a full investigation into corporate finances. I second, Tom said immediately. Wait, one of Jake's lawyers said. You can't just... We absolutely can, Patricia said. This board has a fiduciary responsibility to investors. If there's been financial misconduct, we're legally obligated to investigate. I also moved to suspend Jake's authority as CEO pending investigation, Tom added. Seconded, Eric said. You can't vote me out, Jake said. I own this company. No, Mitchell said calmly. You don't. Richard does. And as majority shareholder, he has the right to remove you immediately. All eyes turned to me. Jake's face had gone pale. Dad, please, don't do this. Why not? Because I'm your son. You stopped acting like my son when you humiliated me in front of your staff, when you called me too old to contribute, when you tried to erase me from your company's history. I was wrong. I admit it. I was wrong. But please don't destroy everything. I'm not destroying everything. I'm rebuilding on honest foundations. Without you... Amanda grabbed Jake's arm. Fight back. Don't let him do this. But Jake just stood there, staring at me, and I could see the realization hitting him. He'd lost, completely. The board voted. 4-1 to suspend Jake's CEO role, 4-1 to launch an investigation, 4-1 to give me interim control of the company. Only Brandon Wells voted against it. I just think there should be due process. Investigation first, suspension after. But he was outvoted. Mitchell pulled out the lease termination notice. Additionally, as building owner, Richard is formally terminating Jake's lease effective 30 days from now. The company has 1 month to find new offices or cease operations. You can't do that, one of Jake's lawyers protested. He absolutely can, Mitchell said. The lease agreement includes a termination clause for safety violations. The city inspector found 37 violations. That's more than enough grounds. Jake grabbed his briefcase, his papers. This isn't over. It is, I said quietly. No. I'll sue. I'll fight this. You'll lose. Every step, every motion, every appeal. Because I have documentation, evidence, truth, and you have lies that are falling apart. He looked at me. Really looked at me. And I saw something in his eyes. Not anger, not even fear. Understanding. He finally understood what he'd done. What he'd lost. What he'd thrown away. Too late. He walked out. Amanda followed, her heels clicking angrily against the tile. The board members sat in silence for a moment. Then Patricia spoke. Richard, I owe you an apology. I should have seen this coming. I should have asked more questions. You trusted your CEO. That's not a failing. It is when the CEO is lying to us. Tom Chen stood. What happens now? To the company? That depends, I said. Do we have enough capital to fix the building violations and continue operations? Patricia pulled up financial reports on her laptop. If we cut personal expenses and reduce unnecessary spending, yes. Barely. But yes. Then we fix the building. We operate ethically. We present honest projections to investors, and we rebuild trust. Under your leadership? Temporary leadership. Once things stabilize, the board can hire a real CEO, someone competent, someone honest. Mitchell was packing up his briefcase. I'll file the necessary paperwork to make this official. Richard, you'll have full legal control by end of week. Thank you. After everyone left, it was just Linda and me in the conference room. You did it, she said softly. Yes. How do you feel? I thought about that. How did I feel? Not triumphant, not satisfied, just tired. I feel like I just had to discipline a child, I said finally, and no parent wants to do that, but sometimes it's necessary. He'll hate you for this. Probably. Does that bother you? Yes, but not enough to let him continue unchecked. We gathered our folders, our evidence, our documentation. 22 years of careful planning, 22 years of building something solid, and in 3 years, Jake had almost destroyed it all, but not anymore. As we left the building, I saw Jake and Amanda in the parking garage. They were arguing, loudly, her voice rising, his shoulders slumped. I didn't approach them, just watched from a distance. And then I got in my truck and drove home. It wasn't over yet. There would still be legal battles, investor meetings, press statements, all the messy aftermath of corporate restructuring. But the foundation was set. Jake was out. Truth was in. And for the first time in weeks, I felt like I could breathe. The fallout came fast. Tuesday morning, news broke. Tech CEO suspended amid fraud allegations. The local business journal ran it first. Then the tech blogs picked it up. By noon, it was trending on social media. Jake's carefully crafted image, the young entrepreneur, the self-made success story, collapsed in hours. My phone wouldn't stop ringing. Reporters, investors, random people who somehow got my number. I ignored most calls, answered only the essential ones. Mitchell called it too. Jake's lawyers filed an emergency motion. They're trying to block the lease termination. On what grounds? They're arguing the 30-day notice is insufficient given the scope of the violations. They're asking for 6 months to remedy everything. That's absurd. I agree, but we have to respond. I need you at the courthouse tomorrow, 10 a.m. I'll be there. Linda found me in the workshop that evening. Have you seen this? She held up her phone. Amanda's social media. A long post about how I'd sabotaged Jake, how I couldn't handle his success, how this was all revenge for being pushed aside. The post had thousands of likes, hundreds of comments, most supporting Amanda, calling me bitter, vindictive, worse. People believe her, Linda said. Some people. Most people. Jake and Amanda are young, attractive, successful. You're the old man who couldn't let go. That's the narrative they're pushing. The truth will come out. Will it? Because right now, Amanda's version is the one getting attention. She was right. In the court of public opinion, I was losing badly. Nobody cared about maintenance violations or embezzled funds. They cared about the story of a young couple being torn down by a bitter father. What do we do? Linda asked. Nothing. We let Mitchell handle the legal battle. Public opinion doesn't matter. It matters to Jake and Amanda. They're making you into a villain. Then I'm a villain who's telling the truth. Wednesday morning, the courthouse. Mitchell and I sat in the waiting area outside the judge's chambers. Jake and his lawyers sat across from us. We didn't speak, didn't even make eye contact. The judge called us in at 10:15. This should be simple, Judge Morrison said, looking over the filings. Mr. Brenner owns the building. The lease includes a termination clause for safety violations. The city inspector found numerous violations. Case closed. Jake's lawyer stood. Your Honor, while technically true, the violations weren't entirely my client's fault. He relied on building management to handle certifications. They failed to inform him properly. I stood. That's not true, Your Honor. I have documentation showing that building management sent my son 23 separate emails warning him about pending violations. He ignored every single one. Do you have those emails? Mitchell handed over the folder. Judge Morrison read through them, his expression growing darker with each page. Mr. Brenner, he said to Jake, did you receive these warnings? I received communications, yes, but I was busy running a company. I delegated maintenance issues to my staff. Did your staff handle them? Silence. I'll take that as a no. Judge Morrison closed the folder. Motion denied. The 30-day termination notice stands. Mr. Brenner has every right to evict a tenant who's put lives at risk through negligence. But, Your Honor, we're done here. In the hallway outside, Jake finally looked at me. You're really going through with this, destroying everything. I'm not destroying anything. I'm protecting what I built. By kicking me out. By holding you accountable. Dad, please. I know I screwed up. I know I said things I shouldn't have. But this is my life. My career. Everything I've worked for. Everything you worked for was built on my foundation, and you forgot that. I'll never forget again. I promise. Just give me another chance. I looked at my son, at his expensive suit and his desperate eyes and his last-minute pleas, and I felt nothing. No, I said simply. No? You had your chance. Multiple chances. You chose image over substance, lies over truth, and now you face consequences. Amanda appeared from around the corner. Jake, don't beg him. He's not worth it. Amanda, no. He wants to destroy you? Let him. We'll rebuild somewhere else. Without him. Without his building. Without his patents. You can't build without the patents, I said. They're the foundation of everything. Then we'll create new technologies, better ones. With what money? With what credibility? Jake's been suspended. Investors are pulling out. The company's bleeding cash. We'll find new investors. Who? Who's going to invest in a CEO who's been suspended for fraud? She didn't have an answer for that. Jake turned to me one last time. What do you want from me? An apology? Is that it? Fine. I'm sorry. I'm sorry I humiliated you. I'm sorry I called you too old. I'm sorry for everything. There. Are you happy? This isn't about happiness. This is about you learning that actions have consequences. I've learned. Believe me, I've learned. Have you? Because you're still making excuses. Still trying to shift blame. Still acting like you're the victim here. I am the victim. You're destroying my life. No, Jake. You destroyed your own life. I'm just making sure you can't blame anyone else for it. I walked away. Mitchell followed. Behind us, I heard Amanda consoling Jake, promising him they'd fight back, they'd win somehow. But they wouldn't win. Because I had truth on my side, and they only had lies. The next few days were a blur. Legal filings, board meetings, press statements. The company's PR team tried damage control, but it was too late. The story was out. Tech CEO suspended for fraud. Building violations. Investor lawsuits pending. Jake's reputation was in ruins. Friday afternoon, Tom Chen called. The other investors want a meeting with you. They're concerned about their stake in the company. When? Tomorrow, 2 p.m. The conference room at the building. I'll be there. Saturday, I arrived early, set up documents, prepared my presentation. At 2, the investors filed in. 8 of them, all wearing identical expressions of concern. Thank you for coming, I said once everyone was seated. We didn't have much choice, said one investor, a woman named Jessica. Our money is tied up in this company. We need to know what's happening. Fair enough. I pulled up financial reports. The company is hemorrhaging cash. Jake's spending was unsustainable. Expense fraud aside, he was burning through capital on unnecessary costs. Fancy offices, company cars, conference trips that had no ROI. How bad is it? At current burn rate, we have about 3 months of runway. After that, we're done. Unless we restructure, cut costs, focus on actual revenue generation instead of appearances, rebuild credibility with clients. Under whose leadership? Mine, temporarily, until the board can hire a permanent CEO. The investors exchanged glances. Jessica spoke. No offense, Mr. Brenner, but you're not exactly who we pictured running this company. Because I'm old? Because you're not a tech person. You're an inventor. There's a difference. True. But I'm also the person who created the technologies this company is built on. I understand the product better than anyone, including Jake. Jake had vision? Jake had ambition. Vision requires truth. Jake was building on lies. Another investor, a younger guy named Michael, leaned forward. So what's your plan? Fix the building, cut costs, and then what? We're still 3 months from bankruptcy. Not if we reclaim the patents properly. The technologies are worth millions if licensed correctly. Jake was undervaluing them, trying to sell the whole company instead of creating sustainable revenue through licensing. That could work, Jessica admitted, if we have time to implement it. We have time, barely, but we have it. The meeting lasted 2 hours. By the end, the investors were cautiously optimistic, not thrilled, but willing to give restructuring a chance. As they filed out, Jessica pulled me aside. I'm sorry about what happened with Jake. That can't have been easy. It wasn't. For what it's worth, I think you're doing the right thing. Then why didn't you vote against him when he was running the company into the ground? She looked uncomfortable. Because Jake was convincing. And Amanda, she was always there, backing him up, making it seem like any concerns we had were just us being overcautious. You knew there were problems. We suspected. But we wanted to believe. Believing was easier than admitting we'd invested in someone who was in over his head. And now? Now we know better, and we'll support you, as long as you're honest with us. I'm always honest. That's what we're counting on. Sunday, I spent the day at the building, supervising repairs. The elevator was fixed first. New certification, new safety systems, new everything. Cost $58,000. The fire suppression system came next. Another $32,000. HVAC, $24,000. Structural repairs, $16,000. Total, $130,000. More than Jake had been willing to spend. More than he'd thought was necessary. But now it was necessary. Because the city was watching. Because investors were watching. Because I'd promised to do things right. Peter, the building manager, stood beside me as we watched the contractors work. I should have pushed harder, made Jake listen. He wouldn't have listened. Still, I let him ignore the problems. That's on me, too. You sent him 23 emails, and he ignored all of them. That's not your failure. That's his. Peter was quiet for a moment. Then, what happens when the 30 days are up? Where does Jake's company go? I don't know. That's his problem. You're really not going to give him more time? Why should I? Because he's your son. I looked at Peter. Would you let your son put people's lives at risk? Would you let him commit fraud? Would you let him humiliate you publicly and then expect you to forgive him? No, probably not. Then you understand why I'm doing this. That evening, Linda and I sat on our back porch, watching the sunset. The neighborhood was quiet. Kids playing in a nearby yard, someone mowing their lawn, normal life, far removed from corporate battles and legal fights. Do you miss him? Linda asked. Jake? Yes. I thought about that. Did I miss my son? I miss who he used to be. The kid who asked questions, who wanted to learn, who cared about doing things right instead of just looking successful. That kid is still in there somewhere. Maybe, but he's buried under years of bad choices and worse influences. Amanda didn't help, but Jake made his own choices. He chose image over substance, lies over truth, and now he's paying for it. Do you think he'll ever forgive you? No. Does that bother you? Less than I expected. She took my hand. You're a good man, Richard, a good father, even when it's hard. Being a good father sometimes means letting your kids fail. This is more than letting him fail. This is making sure his failure doesn't take other people down with him. We sat in silence for a while, watching the sun drop below the horizon, feeling the evening air cool, and I thought about Monday, about the next board meeting, about the slow, painful process of rebuilding a company that my son had nearly destroyed. It would take time, months, maybe years, but it would be built on truth this time, on solid foundations, and that made all the difference.